Over the years, many Star Wars fans have come up with a variety of hot takes about the Jedi Order and their beliefs and practices. Most of these are criticisms of the Order, ranging from disagreements with the Jedi Code to actively blaming the Jedi for their own fall. But today, we have our own hot take to bring to the table. The Jedi were actually right, and many common criticisms of them are based on misconceptions. Now, obviously, we're not saying that every individual Jedi was a saint here. In fact, we aren't going to concern ourselves with the virtues and flaws of individual Jedi at all. Instead, we're going to be looking at the Jedi Order as a whole and explaining why they, on an ideological level, were completely in the right.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. These are the words of the Jedi Code, the mantra that define the ideology of the Jedi. As we take a look at the Jedi Order today, we're going to be referencing lines of this code a fair bit, so keep them in mind. The only one of these 5 tenets that we won't be addressing is the last one. There is no death, there is the Force. If you're interested in learning more about that line, we've done a full video about the relationship between death and the Force, and we would recommend you go check it out. Now let's take a look at the ideology this code represented. To put it simply, the Jedi were lightsiders. Their approach to the Force was to allow the will of the Force to guide them into doing what was best for the universe without letting selfish desires get in the way. This was how the Force was meant to be used, and as the Jedi correctly understood, it was the only way the Force could be used if balance was to be maintained. The Order was dedicated to protecting that balance, both by ensuring the supremacy of the light and by keeping the peace on a galactic scale. This was in fulfillment of the penultimate line of the Jedi Code. There is no chaos, there is harmony. To maintain the balance of the Force, the Jedi Order needed to destroy the dark side wherever it reared its ugly head. Preferably, the dark side would be prevented from taking root in the first place. When it first made contact with the Republic, the Jedi believed that the way to do this was to absorb other Force-based traditions and recruit as many Force sensitives as possible. But this in turn generated new challenges. As they opened more and more beings up to the Force, some of those beings were drawn to the dark side for various reasons, and the Jedi Order itself ended up unintentionally creating dark side threats. This was a serious problem because, as the old children's rhyme went, the Jedi who fall are the most dangerous of all. However, as the years went on, the Order adapted its practices to prevent this sort of thing from happening, and by the time of the Republic Golden Age, they had worked out methods aimed at keeping their students from failing. These methods include some of the most maligned bits of the Order's practices, including their recruitment policy and their stance on emotional attachments. A lot of people, both in-universe and out, had some serious misconceptions about both of these Jedi practices. The Jedi were not, in fact, baby snatchers. While they did only recruit young children, they only ever did so with the parents' express consent, as per Republic law. Usually, parents were more than eager to give their children to the Order, as it was considered to be a great honor in most galactic cultures. Additionally, while the child recruitment policy may seem a bit culty out of the proper context, it was ultimately a necessity. As they believed, the Jedi had to open as many minds to the Force as possible without unleashing new dark side threats in the galaxy. The best way to do this was to raise Jedi initiates free from the traits that led to the dark side. Among other things, this meant preventing younglings from forming emotional attachments, particularly to parents or guardians. This method of preventing attachments from forming also prevented younglings from absorbing prejudices or other harmful attitudes, in keeping with the second line of the code. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. All of this was best done in the Jedi Temple, a safe, welcoming environment where younglings would always be gently guided in the right direction. Speaking of the right direction, let's talk about another part of Jedi ideology that has a lot of misconceptions surrounding it. This cornerstone of Jedi ideology is embodied in the first line of the code. There is no emotion, there is peace. Many in the anti-Jedi camp take this line on face value, claiming that the Jedi Order forbade emotion either entirely or in part, and that they urged Jedi to bottle up their feelings or had similarly unhealthy attitudes toward emotion. Attack of the Clones is routinely cited as an example of this, which is odd because that particular film dispels the notion entirely.
Attachment is forbidden. Possession is forbidden. Compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life. So you might say that we are encouraged to love.
The Jedi Order didn't discourage emotion in a general sense. They discouraged attachment, and they discouraged emotional usage of the Force. These are quite different from suppressing emotion or what have you. The Jedi understood that emotion was a fundamental part of sentient life, and they encouraged healthy emotions such as love, compassion, and the like. While they taught their members to try to avoid negative emotions like fear and anger, they understood that those too were natural. The first line of the Jedi Code was not a call to suppress these emotions or avoid feeling them entirely, but rather it instructed Jedi to avoid letting them take over. Jedi were taught to meditate to ease themselves through moments of negative emotion, which prevented these emotions from becoming too strong. The side of emotion that the Jedi sought to prevent was instead described by the third line of the code. There is no passion, there is serenity. The Order's focus was preventing negative emotions from blossoming into truly dangerous things, like unbridled passion, extreme jealousy, or hatred. In general, they discouraged strong emotional attachments as they found that they tended to lead to the extreme negative emotions Jedi needed to avoid. That may seem like a bit of an extreme measure, but if you consider how many mass murdering Sith Lords came into being because Jedi developed strong attachments, you'll see that they had pretty good reasons for going to these lengths. To understand why the ban on attachments was entirely necessary, we need to take a look at why emotional attachments and strong negative emotions were dangerous for Force users. There were two, and only two, ways to use the Force. One could either open themselves up to the Force and let its will guide their actions, or one could impose one's own will onto the Force, putting their own selfish desires over the greater good of the universe. The former is called the light side, and the latter the dark side. The former was the only safe way to use the Force, while the latter was unnatural and something that needed to be prevented. There was no middle ground here, and there was no safe way to use a little of both either. The dark side was inherently corrupting, and using the Force in that way at all was to risk a total fall. Emotional attachments and negative emotions were to be avoided by Jedi because they made Force sensitives far more likely to use the dark side. They clouded perceptions, making it harder for Jedi to truly open up to the Force and tempting them toward the darkness. The Jedi Order's most routinely criticized practices were aimed at preventing this, and by and large, they were successful. The Council didn't forbid attachments, recruit infants, and train their students to adopt a stoic mentality because they wanted their members to be emotionally unstable, but rather to prevent them from getting to such a state. Say what you will about extreme measures, but they did the job well for 1,000 years. It was only during the Order's last few decades that major exceptions started popping up. Let's take a quick look at the most notable exception to this rule, Anakin Skywalker. Some fans blame Anakin Skywalker's fall in the Jedi Order, claiming that restrictive Jedi teachings were responsible for the rise of Darth Vader. But the reality is that the opposite is true. Anakin's fall is a perfect example of why those strict teachings were entirely necessary. Anakin's disobedience of those teachings was what led to his fall, after all. Darth Vader was born not because the Jedi Order was too strict, but because Anakin Skywalker disregarded Jedi teachings and got into an unhealthy relationship. I mean, seriously, Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala should not have been together, regardless of Jedi teachings. Anakin's attitude toward Padme bordered on being creepy, and during the pair's escapades with Rush Clovis during the Clone Wars, the relationship even became a little abusive. This relationship should never have happened, and that's precisely why the Jedi teachings forbidding attachments were in place. At the end of the day, Anakin Skywalker did still fall for more or less the right reason, namely to save Padme, and that specific situation was, in a way, a result of the attachment ban. But even if the Jedi didn't have those restrictions, Anakin Skywalker still would have fallen to the dark side. At the end of the day, he became Darth Vader because he was attached to an unhealthy degree. This was not something that Jedi teachings caused, but rather something that happened because they were disobeyed. Obviously, the Jedi way of life wouldn't have been ideal for a normal person in our world. But the Jedi, of course, weren't normal people and they didn't live in our world. They had superhuman powers and lived in a galaxy that, when you think about it, was a borderline dystopia, even before the Empire came along. They had no real choice but to take extreme measures if they were to prevent the galaxy from getting worse. And to their credit, the Jedi recognized that not everyone was cut out for this sort of emotional discipline, and they didn't shy away from gently encouraging those who weren't to leave the Order. There was, of course, more to ensuring balance in the Force than self-control and not falling to the dark side. The Jedi also served as the guardians of peace and justice, the valiant knights that righted wrongs and protected the innocent all over the galaxy. This is also an area in which the Jedi routinely came under fire with a bit better reasoning. Despite their claims of keeping the peace and ensuring justice, slavery still existed in the galaxy, as did 1,000 other terrible things. If the Jedi were so good, you may ask, why didn't they fight to change that? Well, the answer to this is simple, if unsatisfying. They simply couldn't. This was largely the fault of the Republic, which heavily regulated the Jedi Order and what its members could and couldn't do. This was really a no-win situation for the Jedi Order. If they disregarded Republic law, it would have brought them into conflict with the Republic, which would have restricted their actions even further than Republic law did. At the end of the day, they made the choice that allowed them to do the most good, even if it was an imperfect one. But then again, the Jedi lived in a deeply imperfect galaxy. Even if they set out to, they weren't capable of going to war with the Hutts to free all the slaves, or anything like that. There were only a few thousand of them in a dystopian galaxy of 100 quadrillion sentient beings, and there were only so many atrocities they had the manpower to stop or to prevent. The Jedi were not gods, nor cops, nor were they crusaders. Their job was to ensure the balance of the Force, not to dictate how society worked. They certainly tried to push society in the right direction. Where they could, they kept people alive, freed slaves, helped the weak and needy, and all of that. But when it came to fixing the galaxy as a whole, that was something only the galactic masses had the right to do, not a small group of warrior monks. The Jedi were always sure to support the right choices when they were made, but they couldn't make the right choices for everyone else. So that's our take on the Jedi Order and why they were actually in the right. But what do you think? Do you want to follow up to this video? There are plenty more anti-Jedi myths for us to dispel after all. Feel free to give us more fodder for videos in the comment section below. We love reading them. And just before clicking the next suggested video about Palpatine's sex life, make sure you check out some of our links in the description below, including our brand new channel called The Braved, where we delve deep into history to bring you some of the most badass people from all different eras. And if you're more into music, check out our Relax Jack, where we use a lot of the music produced there on the channel here. And if you want access to a behind the scenes Discord where you can chat to myself and the team members who make this video, consider donating to the Patreon. Also, if you want to join us on our Geetsly's gaming network and Geetsly's main Discord, all those links are in the description below. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.